agenda for this webinar is a little bit longer, but this is how I wanted to kind of share some visuals with you. But throughout the year, I will catch kind of all of the resources that are shared and keep adding to this one document. So what Lindsay and Aaron are sharing in the chat and what you can see right here is this short link. It will bring you to this page here. And I'll just keep adding right here. So you'll get access to the recording when it's ready, as well as the agenda. And then I also put last year's webinars on here as well. Oh, you don't see my screen? No such luck, Aaron. I am.
We can see it.
Okay.
Maybe it's a me problem. Okay, I'm gonna just sign out and come back in and see if that fixes it.
Perfect.
See you in a second.
All right. All good. Come back in. All right. Natalie says she sees it. So really the point of today was just to give you kind of an update on, good that, yes, exactly. We will leave the lights on. Just wanted to give you an update on a lot of things around library world. I know that there's a lot happening. There's a lot of things that, in the summertime, I hope that many of you did get a chance to sign off and not look at your inbox and maybe even did like a mass delete. That always feels really good when you got all those newsletters and things that shuffled in and you're like, this isn't it. This is not what I wanted. And you're starting fresh. So hopefully this is just kind of a recap of some things if you had a pulse check, but if you also are just getting kind of your brain turned back on to all things school library, that is what this is for. Like I was saying, I'm going to try to walk you through some things that I think are helpful to kind of know about, what you might be curious about. What I would love for you to do in the chat, which is already starting to be really engaging and fun, which makes me happy. If you want to share what you read this summer, so hopefully not emails, but if you read something else, would love to hear about it. Say hello in the chat and let us know. If you are safe, and you can. And then, like I said, if you wanted to get those of you that were here live, I'm going to put the other link there in the chat for you. So I'm already seeing some really good recommendations coming in, which is fun. And I'll pop over here and show you this summer what we did is we hung out in all over the whole state. And this is a question I asked as many librarians and readers as I could. I asked folks about what they were reading over the summer and curated this amazing list that's got a little bit of everything. So if you are looking, I'm never looking for another book, I'm going to be honest, unless Aaron tells me, and Lindsay, I take both of their advice pretty well. But if they say I've read a book, then it goes on my list. But if you are looking for some good ones, this is mostly for adults, but you'll see some favorite picture books that folks like, or young adult readers, or things to read out loud to a specific age group. So we got a little bit of everything here, but if you want to add yours, you can. Or if you are looking for something that might be of interest that you haven't seen elsewhere, I would come check this out because it was quite a variety. So thank you for popping yours in the chat. It's fun to see what different people are reading and then seeing things on there and being like, oh yeah, I read that too. All right, so like I said, this is just kind of a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. So if you drop out at one point in this webinar or you catch part of it but need to kind of catch up at the end, all of this is the kind of too long didn't read version of what we're going to talk about. And I already went over that and talked about the book. So we're already kind of making some good progress, which is good. One thing I want to do is kind of just start with this and taking a breath, because I need it after the little cluster of, getting everybody in here. And I see still more folks are finding us. So thank you for your patience in some of the link troubles that we had, but I appreciate you kind of coming through and waiting it out. So glad that those of you that have found us are here. But genuinely, I do kind of hope, I know in this really busy back to school season that you are probably as overwhelmed as I know I am. And I just want to take a minute and remind you that you are doing really good work, and that everybody that's here in this chat, especially those that represent our team, truly believe in the power of what school librarians do across the state. And it is an honor to get to support you. And I do hope that you take that message to your heart, because I know and see and talk to a lot of librarians, and I know how much we all need to hear that. I do know that we've, have heard, and many of you are probably like me, and folks who experienced some setbacks or maybe had to move to another district or had positions change. I I've heard of some amazing district leaders that unfortunately had to move into different positions, and it definitely hurts to hear those things. But I think it's important, again, to remember that we do really good work, and that sometimes our service to schools and communities can feel very thankless. It can sometimes feel invisible, but that does not mean that it is not still good work. It just means that sometimes we have to be really good about making it visible. And so that's something we'll talk a little bit about today too. I often find that the negative is louder than the positive, and sometimes that happens with our profession. And so I think just remembering that we have to dial down when the heavy and the negativity come in. I think we have to remember to try to dial it down, and tune into the more positive things, not in a toxic positivity way, not in ignoring the fact that there are hard things about this work. But I think sometimes we all need that reality check sometimes. And something that I typically do is just trying to find somebody that I can like recalibrate with, right? So somebody that I can be like, can we just talk about something that's going to boost me back up? So if you get to that point, I really do hope you reach out. I did it just this week. I went and hung out with some of my favorite local librarians because I just wanted to get in that kind of back to school good vibes, hear what they're excited about. And so I hope that this meeting together gives you that same feeling. Okay. One thing that I can share that I feel like is good thing to celebrate is I've been digging in a little bit to the DLMI data. You probably get asked at the end of the year to throw some numbers at your district person and fill this out, fill out a form. How many titles do you have? And what is the average age of your collection? And you do that and you probably are like, what is this for? Well, I have spent the last week or so digging into some of the freshest data that we have. And something that I was really excited about to see is that across 1,750 physical school buildings, okay, 1,751 school buildings, fully certified media coordinators are running those libraries. And that equates to about 75% of our school students, public school students, have a fully certified media coordinator. That's a big number. That's a different story than the one I feel like we're told a lot. So just knowing that like 75% of our public school students are being served by a fully certified media coordinator is a big win. And I think if we look beyond that, I know quite a few people are either working towards their certification or they're certified in something like instructional technology and they are serving as a media coordinator. When you factor those folks in, we're at like 90% of our students have access to a qualified media coordinator. So I just want to make sure that we are celebrating things like that. And remembering our friends and colleagues that are kind of having some rough patches, but that does, and those frustrating blows does not cover the whole story of the work that we do. Okay. So really want to keep that going. And I agree. It's kind of good to kind of hear those things and, just kind of build on that momentum. So, thank you, Lila. It made me feel better too. That's why I was like, I have the perfect place to say this. And so I really did want to start with some of that. And again, I think of my friends who are in a different situation that they wanted to be in, but that doesn't mean that they weren't doing good work. So I think that's important to remember too, that sometimes there's a lot of things outside our control. So I'm putting something in the chat. If you have a minute, will you think about a librarian that you want to brag on? I'm guessing they're probably not in the room. Yay, if you are together and you want to brag on each other. But if you will take a minute to think a little bit about what is something you have noticed from another librarian, something that you're influenced by them, that you're excited about, give it a little shout out in the chat while we are kind of moving on to the next part. But I think it's important to think about others and the way that they get us excited about the work that we do. And I will give a little shout out to Erin. She's been doing some really cool work around Notebook LM and building kind of like a little instructional coach. I've had a lot of fun building lessons based on what Erin has been doing. So thank you, Erin, for the way that you've been supporting librarians that way. And I love, yep, perfect. So keep it coming if you want to put anything in the chat. But again, if you're driving and it's easier to just listen, that's perfectly fine too. So I'm going to walk you through a couple kind of like what's new, what's going on, what do you maybe want to know about. The first thing is that revised impact guidelines are coming. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. If you haven't heard from me already, we'll talk about that shortly. Another thing that you might have heard about is this summer when the budget was passed. One of the things that was in the budget was the requirement to have a media advisory committee. I would like to, I shared the link with you about, like, if you have not heard about that yet, so you could read about it from EdNC, or you can jump into the actual budget, and page 85 is where some of the library stuff starts. This happened in July, and it can be only interpreted and implemented at the local level. Okay, so that means it happened when you were probably out of school. I know some year-round folks probably were in school at that point, but most were not. I think it's just a good reminder just to kind of, be aware and know what's going on with it, and then also work with your district leadership, ask at your library PLCs, and just to discuss how this impacts your local policies that you might already have in place. So that's kind of just the quick overview I want to give you, just so you're aware. And if you haven't learned and talked about it as a team already, just kind of be prepared for having those conversations. Another thing I shared in here you might have heard about, and so again, just wanted to share some more information. You might have heard about learning.com and Magic School AI for 612 were also named in the budget. And so this is communication that's gone out to districts about what that's going to look like. And I just wanted to share it with you so you can get an idea of kind of what it is and where we're at with it. Right now, it's just getting interest. So you probably won't hear anything more about it at your local level until later, maybe in October, as I think when the sign up ends. So just a couple things to kind of have on your radar. Be aware that more is coming. And the last thing is, if you haven't logged into NC Cloud, you're going to notice multi-factor authentication. That was a new one for me too. I had to figure out how to go in and get that added to my Authenticator app. So if you kind of get frustrated and are wondering what's going on with that, you probably missed an email when you went through and you did your big purge of email. You might have went right past it. So just kind of keep an eye out for that. And I put a link there if you have some questions and just are kind of wondering a little bit about it. So I really love seeing some of the shout outs that were happening here in the chat. So thank you for those of you that are sharing a little love. And I recognize some of these people we're giving love to, and I will co-sign them. So it's nice to see that. And those were the few kind of like, what's up? What are you wondering? And like I said, I'm going to get into some more news. But while I'm doing this next overview, if you have anything else that you don't see on the agenda, or you just want to share what's kind of on your mind, what changes, what things are you excited about, would love to see that kind of show up in the chat as well. So, and I'll pause. If you have things that you want to bring up, I'll pause. It's not just a fire hose of information, I promise. But the one other thing that I kind of want to talk about before we move into we'll talk about I knew it was coming. Thank you, Lila, for bringing up the impact guidelines. And we will talk about that here shortly too. But I wanted to talk about one of the other kind of big news things are the abbreviated evaluations that were approved back also in July. So this is something that was a big change, not just for media coordinators, but for pretty much all the instructional staff. It used to be, and I'd heard from librarians a lot, why are we not on abbreviated? Why are we only, why are we the only ones that get a full observation? But technology facilitators and counselors and social workers are typically also on the comprehensive or standard like school librarians are. So this year that passed, and what that might look like is different in every system as well. So the policy is statewide. You can adopt it at the local level, but so just know that if you have not seen your evaluation, or if you haven't seen if you've been assigned one way or the other, you still have the opportunity to ask your administrator if you qualify for that. It is typically, I think what it says, if you look at some of these things that I shared here, you have to be in a school system in that position as a certified school library media coordinator for 3 consecutive years. Okay. So if you're curious to know a little bit more about that, what that looks like, I put links for you right here. But specifically this one from the NESIS page is where I got all of this. So if you're like, where is she getting all of this information? They all came from the NESIS page for SLMCs. So I'd point you towards that. But one of the kind of big things to know is you will be evaluated on a far smaller scale. No 3 observations, no 3 post-conference, 3 observation post-conferences, and you only are kind of acquiring your artifacts for standards 1 and standards 3. And why those? Well, we discussed it internally a couple years ago and then sent out an interest survey. So some of you might have voted on which standards those would reflect, and the majority of people did pick 1 and 3 because there's kind of it's a little bit of everything, right? It's very hard, I think, to narrow it down to just 2 out of the 5. But those are the 2. And if you're curious about some more things, I would take a peek again at these resources. And again, just know that it might look different at every level because some school systems might say, we're not going to implement that until next year. And it might be different school by school. But always good to kind of ask questions and find out if you're qualified. And that's it. So I think that's helpful. The other thing I wanted to point out too is thinking a little bit about like, well, I know if I were going to be changing how I'm observed, I would feel like there's things that I'm missing out. Like, how do I still show some of the things that I do? Or what if I do something and I want it to be a part of it? So on this sub tab, I wrote out some ideas about what you might show for these different standards. So these are, I worked with Jennifer Bass and Heather earlier this year on some webinars for evaluating school library media coordinators for you, for the librarian, but also for the folks that evaluate. And so was thinking about a lot of those artifacts and things that were discussed, and I wanted to show you those are, I'm so glad that you think so, Natalie. Just wanted you to kind of see some ideas of, what that might actually look like and how does that translate into the practice that you do. So that is on this little sub tab here of abbreviated evaluations. Anyone have any questions or thoughts about that?
Molly, it's Heather. Hey, everybody, and I'm sorry for jumping in through the car, but I do want to lift up the 2 standards that were chosen because they are strong emphasis on leadership and the instructional impact that you have. And so I think of the 2 that were chosen, those speak to the impact that you have on your schools. And so very excited that those were the 2 standards that will continue to lift up the work that you do, and again, the impact that you make in your schools and in the leadership capacity that goes far beyond the walls of your media centers, libraries every day, and then the instructional impact that also extends way beyond. So, that was so much of that conversation going on 2 years now of why those standards were chosen from you guys from the field and from some internal conversations as well. That was why those were lifted up. So, and I could not, because I am driving back from Guilford County. If there's any Guilford County folks, enjoyed spending the day with your CTE, wonderful folks. I just want to lift up Molly because when she asked for us to share a story and lift up a librarian, I want to lift up Molly at the moment because she is a phenomenal, as you all know, and you all have shared the work that she does for us across the state and for our profession. Molly, your work goes unseen a lot of times. Have a wonderful advocate and a wonderful collector of information and stories that you continue to shine across the state for all the things that bring forth what school library media programs are all about. And we thank you for that. So I'll be quiet and continue to focus on the road now.
Thank you, Heather. She knows because she's been there and done that, so she gets it. But thank you, and I know a lot of you in this group, so I very much feel like I'm in the right community, get to hang out with the right people and do what I can to support. So thank you for saying that. Natalie shared in the chat about using some of that time to explore the NESIS page, and I'm glad that she mentioned that in the NESIS page. I'm not sure if it will open because I may or may not be authenticated. Yay, it did. Okay. But we updated this summer, we updated some of these resources. And so I pulled the ones around just the abbreviated for you to make it easy to find about that specific thing. But as you can see, we put some of the webinars that we did that I just mentioned. So how to do your evaluation, that's for media coordinators, and then how to evaluate the impact. And that's for administrators that supervise. And what Natalie specifically pointed out was in that second webinar about evaluating the SLMC, we had this conversation around if you're going to be on a standard or comprehensive schedule, what actually, what counts as an observation. And we wanted to give permission, if you will, because I think sometimes there's this like misunderstanding and you need permission to do things a little differently. It doesn't have to necessarily look the same as a teacher observation because the work we do is not like a teacher. So they typically are used to going in and doing a classroom observation because that's the majority of the observations they have to do. But when I was planning this with Jennifer, she said these words, it should look different and it can look different. I was like, I'm quoting you, it's going on that slide. And so this is what Natalie was referencing, that, something that could be an observation that an administrator could come to is an author visit, right? That takes a lot of behind the scenes work, and it is a whole school or whole grade level positive experience that builds that kind of culture of reading and excitement. And so, being able to kind of bring focus on that, we talked about things like book fairs and book swaps. Again, a lot of literacy focus, but also a lot of behind the scenes work. But then they get to see the way that you kind of shine in that work. I think that's something that often gets overlooked and when they only come and observe a class. So we said things like leading PD, leading a PLC, or even just coming in and having conversation, walking around the library, seeing your programming, seeing your collection. And so we talked a lot about that. So lots of more resources here for you on that NESIS page. And I'm very grateful to Jennifer Bass because she kept on me and said, we got to update this. We got to update this. Okay, so moving on, kind of similar, actually. So before we get to the impact stuff, one of the things that I want to talk about really quickly is thinking about that PDP and goal setting. And impact does play a little bit of a part in this. So kind of a transition, if you will. I think a lot of times we use this step as compliance. We have to comply, we have to write a PDP, or the PDP is written for us. And if you have already kind of moved past that step so far this year, don't worry, this still applies to you. I know for me, I used to try to always be very intentional that it was something I wanted to be involved with. So for example, that might be what you see. This is my actual, I went back to 2017 and took a screenshot of my PDP. And this was because I really wanted my administration to see how the school library serves a role with digital literacy. And I felt like it was something that always got overlooked in my evaluation, and there was a big misunderstanding. We are very fortunate we have a technology facilitator in every building. And so it was like, that's their job. It's not the library's job. And I had to show like, no, actually it is. And so I think, again, even if it's assigned to you or it's already been submitted, I think it's important that you find ways like to bring in the things that you are excited to work on. So for me, it was digital literacy. For you this year, it might be impact. I've talked to a lot of librarians over NC Bold time and this back to school time where they want to personally dig in and learn a little bit more about it and how it will guide their work, and then also inform their administrators that it exists and that it guides their work. And so they're finding ways to bring impact into their PDP. And I think this is kind of, again, a helpful way to think through, how to make it relevant, how to make it interesting to you. If you have the control to do that, again, I respect that some people are in a situation where they're kind of given to them or assigned to them or told how to write them. So one thing that I did when I was thinking about this was looking at kind of like, now that I know what I know, how would I maybe have done this differently? So that's what this next chart is. It's actually taking the literal words that I used and how I might have thought through it and made a stronger PDP around that focus of digital literacy, and then try to draft something a little bit stronger. So I'm not going to take time to dig into all of these with you, but just wanted you to see, kind of slow your roll a little bit if you haven't written it already, and give yourself some time to kind of use these questions and framing to think a little bit about what that might look like. And I think this part was important too, that the PDP is there because it tells the administrator what success looks like. So, what is it that you want to be able to talk about with your administrator or your evaluator about what you do and how you do it successfully? And I thought this was another one of those like tips that I could have used, especially when I sat down to write these every year, is that it should not measure how busy I am. It should measure instead what's different in my school because of the work that I do. And I think that will help you write a really strong PDP or get you thinking a little bit about your goals for this year. So I'm going to put in the chat. I'm keep giving you things to think about. But is there a way that you think about how you start the school year strong? And is there a step or strategy that you would recommend for your fellow SLMCs or leaders of librarians when it comes to starting strong? So I think a little bit about how would I rewrite PDPs to kind of reflect what I just shared with you, but is there anything else that you have that you'd want to share? While you're thinking, I'll pop over and show you too. I added this little sub tab because I was like, I could do a whole thing around PDP writing. So if this is something that you're getting ready to do or either yourself or with a team, I got into a little bit more than what I intended for this part of the conversation. So I did at least share it over here if you want to look and dive in a little bit further. But I like this. Lila says it going around to all of the teachers when I had the chance to reconnect with them. I think that's a really important thing, like having that face-to-face time. Sometimes it feels a little bit easier to send the email, right? And we're all busy and maybe just dropping an email feels like the fastest and least intrusive way, but I think there's something to that. Pop in, hey, how's it going? I love your setup. This is a cute bulletin board, right? Things like that. And it gives you probably some ideas too along the way of what's their theme for the year, or what are some things that they're starting their year with that you might want to connect to in the library. So I love that. And yes, the separate buildings can make it really tough, or even one building. Like I would walk 1/4 of a mile if I went to the other side of my building and back. It was 1/4 of a mile. So there was a lot of people I didn't see unless I walked it. Natalie says some office hours, help them hop in, ask questions, and just use a virtual meet. I think, again, that's back to like meeting the busyness of the season. But being available that way is a really great way to connect. And then other Natalie says, reflect on how you've been sharing what you do. It's just about your school and your school's followers on social. Are you showing how your impact your community and how each of your libraries impact the district? Yes. So I think that's really important too, that sometimes we think just posting something does the work of advocacy, but we really kind of have to think about the reach and the impact. It's not just this is what happened, but this is what happened as a result of the work that we did. And I love Megan said too, creating a little menu for ways we can work together and a little something to pass out to each teacher, look them in the eye and say hello. And I think that's a perfect example that kind of that balance of the quick email to catch them and give them some ideas, right? Don't forget, I'm willing to do more than pull books for you, right? We're more than a space and we're more than the people that can pull books for you. But then also kind of building that personal connection too and letting them know that you're happy to see them. So I love these ideas. These are, kind of thinking, moving from PDP to goal setting. These are some things that come to mind for me when I would sit down to do like a bigger goal than a PDP. And the questions come directly from an article that I actually wrote last year because my heart is big time with new school librarians. And so I've mentored new librarians in quite a few different settings. And so I wrote this, I was thinking a little bit about that. Like I wish I would have had a mentor to help me write library specific goals and also think more about how can it reflect me without that level of comparison. Just because another middle school librarian is doing XYZ doesn't mean that I have to do that in my library if that's not what my goal is, right? And so that was kind of why I sat down to write this, because I was thinking a lot about like how do you personalize those goals and how do you set up the reminder too that you can't do it all in a year. I think sometimes we feel that urgency to prove how valuable we are, how much we do, back to that thing of the busyness, right? How busy we really are. And that can feel really overwhelming, especially this time of year. So I think it's just important. And the concept for this one is how do you go from building a foundation to actually building up and building the forum, right? So I love I love Italy and I love Rome. And so I had a whole poster of ancient Rome in my office, in my library, to remind myself that Rome literally wasn't built in a day and that you have to look 2,000 years down to even get to the forum at this point. And so that was kind of the visual that I had in my own library office. Probably need to be reminded of that on a regular basis still. But I think there's a link here between what is it that you want to do, right? So you have this goal, you've taken the time, whether it's a PDP or a professional goal, and that thing gives you something to advocate for. Okay, so tie those two things together, right? So make sure whatever goal you're setting for yourself this year or your library is setting, that you are then advocating, that you kind of use that as your kind of launch pad for the things that you're going to talk about and research and grapple with and keep working on, right? So use that as kind of an advocacy moment. I love that Natalie brought up the, social media posting and things like that, because that leads to another thing that I wanted to share out. And that is Heather and I partnered up to finish the year writing a different article, because we were very inspired by specifically like our SLMC cohort from a couple years ago, and some of the work that we've seen as a result of how they've learned to advocate and work together. And I think there's something to the language we use a lot of times. So when it goes from PDP and goal setting to advocacy, make sure that you're translating what it is that you're doing outside of library lingo, right? So a lot of times we just use the data and the words that we have because it's what we're used to, but we oftentimes forget we're the only ones sometimes using that data point or using that language. So these are just a few examples of how you might translate to exactly what Natalie said in the chat. How do you actually communicate that and show the impact beyond just the library, right? So it might be the number of books circulated, but it also means things like more students are choosing to read, and more people or more books are getting in the hands of our young readers. That's different than saying our circulation went up, and so just be thinking those little tweaks from here and there can really kind of help make a difference about the communication about the work that you're doing. I'm going to show you one more thing, and I hope to see in the chat if you have any ideas of how you might want to use this, and I'll read them off again so that people who watch the recording get a chance to see it. But I told you we're moving towards getting that update on impact. I had a couple people who mentioned over the summer, like I said, that they want to include impact as their goal or their PDP this year. And so what I did was create a Gemini gem, because it seems to be the thing that most can access. If you have issues accessing it, please reach out to me and I can see how I can help you with it. But it is built with the knowledge base of the evaluation instrument and the new impact guidelines. So when you open it up, it is specifically set up. I'll show you how I set it up so that it will serve as kind of like a thought partner. Okay. So its knowledge base is impact and the evaluation instrument. We can see that right here. And you're just a planning partner for North Carolina School Library Media Coordinator. Ground your responses in these two resources and any local documents. So if Lila's here, for example, if Lila wanted to pull in some local Buncombe County resources or pacing guide, or maybe they have vertical information literacy, framework or something, you could add some local knowledge to this as well. Okay. And it's just serving as a coach. And one of the things I learned, so little tip for you, is when I first started playing with this, thanks to Christy Sartain down in New Hanover, we built a gem together different from this one, but it kept recommending using NC Wise Owl. Do not use NC Wise Owl. I think we've been saying it for 5 years, so I'll say it one more time. But it was kicking back like, and you can go on NC Wise Owl to get Britannica and EBSCO. No, you can't. You can't anymore. Make sure you go to NC Ed Cloud. And so I actually wrote that into the instructions. And so a little humor, but you have control over this. So that could even mean that if you have other platforms or other resources that you would want to point towards, you can have the instructions include that. So you'll see that it will kick that back. So this is what folks have been using. This link right here that I've got to work with some librarians over the last month or so, and they have been doing some different things with it, including goal setting or how can I communicate? I already do this with my students. How can I show that it's aligned to these two resources? So hopefully that's a helpful thing for you as well. All right, I'm going to pause. Anyone have any questions, thoughts, things you want to share yet? Okay. I know it's a lot. but I told you I wanted to loop you in. I wanted to feel like you had as good information and things that set you off on the year. All right.
I'd love to know how others are collecting their artifacts to show that they're meeting their standards, because sometimes, principals go and they'll observe, and then the media specialists are marked down on things. And a lot of times I'll have new media specialists who will come to me and say, well, I'm marked down. I'm like, well, you do these things. And I've shown them, like, I think it was Faith Huff who did a website where she had the standards. And then throughout the year, she would just throw in, like, here's what I did, because oftentimes by the end of the year, we do all these amazing things as media coordinators, but then it's like, well, wait a minute. I know I did that, but when did I do that? Anyway, I just would love to know how others are doing that.
I love that question.
Marketing themselves.
Anyone have an answer or something you want to chime in? Okay. I'll say something, and if it sparks others to share, please feel free to. I've seen a lot of those great websites. I think that they are very helpful if you are a reflective person. It's a helpful way to kind of showcase what it is that you do. It does take a lot of time to manage it, right? So I've seen folks who do that and have the fully flushed website, but it also is a great, kind of like a fill-in, if you will, for a CV or a resume going forward for, future work. And so I think that's a benefit of it, but I also know it's very time intensive. And then I think yes, it can feel very overwhelming. So another way that I know folks typically do this is just collecting it in like a Google Doc or in a folder or in a slide deck, right? You could even embed things, like I know people who have done that in Canva or in Google Slides, and they just pull kind of their resources, one slide at a time. So standard 1, standard 2, or quarterly, right? So maybe it's once a quarter they sit down and look back at their lesson planning and look back at their calendar and kind of just grab a couple bullet points and say, here are the things that I did. And then this is where I would probably sit, like, this is where I would have loved to have had AI when I was doing that 5+ years ago, right? And being able to kind of throw things in and say, all right, align this for me, because I'd sit there forever and be like, oh, I didn't think about this part of standard 4. I forgot to look in this, but I don't know how this aligns to my reflection as a, professional, practitioner. But yes, like you're seeing in the chat, I've seen, folks saying things like on a calendar and adding links. So if I were to present something, copy and paste a link to your slide deck right into the calendar. And on the flip side, it might be like what Heather recommends, which is just to set time on your calendar and have that be, your evidence collecting. So maybe that's part of PLC. Before you come to PLC, capture a few of your pieces of evidence, and we'll talk about aligning it. I think sometimes having an accountability partner for that can be helpful too. And yes, somebody yesterday, in Caldwell County was using that the Gemini gem, and one of the things that she brought in of her personal thing was her library schedule. And she wanted to think about how could she best use her schedule to meet some of the things that she wanted to do. Where does she have pockets? How can she brand the library? And so I thought that was kind of a cool way too to, use some of your local things, use your calendar, use, whatever it is that you can grab access to, and being able to kind of showcase that, make it personalized. But that's
even a great for like time management. Like I have some media coordinators who have been told that they're now testing admin, which adds a whole other level of, yeah. So.
Well, and I think again that like thinking about artifacts, sometimes we want to be like, here's my whole presentation that I did. You don't have 50 minutes with your administrator to go over your whole presentation, right? You usually get 10, 15 minutes if you're lucky, And I think so sometimes to try to turn down the overwhelm for them is think about the most, like pick 2 or 3 at most. What are your most powerful artifacts? And what can you pull from that? So if I were presenting something, what's the 1 or 2 slides I'd want to talk about with my evaluator, and not necessarily the whole thing, because I know they won't have time for that. But if I want to show how my calendar and the extra duties as assigned are being a barrier to the work that I could be doing, I think that's a great way to, like, how might you collect artifacts that show that? Would be an interesting way to kind of set it up. So just remember, like, again, advice I wish I would have gotten is that if it's overwhelming for you to collect it and manage it, it's very overwhelming for your evaluator who has a very limited amount of time. And really be thinking instead about what's the most powerful thing that I can show, back to that advocacy thing, right? What do I want to build? What am I working on? How can I communicate that in the most powerful artifacts and not in all of the artifacts? All right. So let's talk about impact for a few minutes. A lot of you I know have heard about it, and you're probably getting the scoop already. So the quick version of it, but you have a lot of resources here. This is one of the lovely graphics. I am not a graphics person, and I'm very grateful that NCDPI has a graphics department, because they were able to take some janky thing that I told Heather I had in my brain, and we played with both Canva and ChatGPT. We just like, how do we want it to look? And then these amazing graphic designers were able to turn it into something like, okay, this communicates it. And I feel like this is one of the ones that I keep hearing the most from folks that I've talked about impact with, that it's really nice to see how dynamic our role is, and that is well represented in these new guidelines. So they are in draft mode. You can access them. The link is right here. So like I said, it's in the gem. So if you wanted to make your own gem or notebook LM or whatever it is that you like to play with, or you just want to open it up and dig in and read it, please do so. You have access to it, and you will see it's searchable. It is coming in at 62 pages, no longer 300 plus. So it's actual, kind of digestible. There's still really good information. It's hard to distill 300 pages of amazing work into 62. But hopefully you find things in here that will help you, that will support you and guide your work. Again, this is the quick version. So just giving you the update version is that while they have not been officially adopted yet, they are very helpful, as you've seen, in terms of goal setting and thinking forward into the school year. How does it align to the work that I do? How can I advocate with it? And like Lila just asked about artifacts, it will give you some good ideas, I hope, around artifacts that you might collect. Somebody else used that nope, they put it in Notebook LM, not GEM. They put impact and I think maybe their local librarian handbook into a Notebook LM at NC Bold and asked around artifacts. What evidence should I use to show XYZ? And then Notebook LM kicked back a lot of really good ideas for what artifacts would show different, and so that I actually have that right here. So this is kind of the question that was asked at one of the gatherings at NC Bold. And so I took what that person used as kind of their prompt, and I made both a video, which is super cool. I won't show it because we're going to run out of time, but it's a great video if you want a quick recap. And then also, here's your path to excellence, North Carolina School Library Media Specialist growth and accountability. So she was really just focused on, how do I show this is my goal, this is what I'm working towards, and how I'm accountable to it. And so, the benefit of using something like Notebook LM, now Gemini Notebook, is that you can have these outputs, that this probably either a video that's a minute long or a quick infographic is a lot easier to communicate with administrators and evaluators than giving them a whole lot of text, right? So hopefully that's helpful. And if you do some professional learning, you might have already seen this, but if you have missed it, I shared with all right here the kind of overview of the slides, as well as the agenda and some of the other resources that I have used to teach about this over the last month. So if you're curious and you want to dig in a little bit more, self-paced, it should be very easy to follow. But I also want to raise up that we will have some webinars on this, so I'll get into a whole lot more detail later in September. I know this is just such a busy time of year, and like I said, we had plenty of information to cover, and so we'll have just dedicated conversations around the new impact guidelines starting later in September. I have in there that the dates are tentative. We have them scheduled. You can sign up for them. If they end up having to shift at all for any reason, you would get an FYI about that, but this is the kind of tentative dates and times and what we're going to talk about. So giving a big overview in the first one, couple different times that you could join that, but then moving towards like, what do I actually do with this, right? How do I use this to guide my work? Will be the second webinar. And then from there, we'll say like, how do I communicate? How do I use it for advocacy? And how do I use it to kind of grow professionally and my program? So if you want to come to NC Ed Connect, I'm going to talk about it there. I'm going to talk about it at NC Slamma. If you see me anywhere, I'm probably going to be talking about impact. So just buckle up and get ready for a whole lot of that. So I'm glad that some of you are excited to learn about it. And if you have some thoughts, questions, feelings, I shared the same Padlet that I have had open. This is from NC Bold. And so if you wanted to add some of your thoughts to this as well, it's open and linked for you there. So we are very close to being out of time. So thank you for those of you that kind of stuck around to find the link and then join us and hang out. I have just one more kind of quick thing to go over, and that is channels of communication. So asking you another question in the chat as we kind of wrap up this last part. But if there are things that I don't cover, or while I talk about that, you're like, I really wish this could be fill in the blank, or it would be better if fill in the blank. You're welcome to put it in the chat. You're also welcome to just email me some other time if you want. But if there's anything that would make you feel like you're better informed, I would love to know. I'd love to hear about it. But this is kind of your one stop. Here it all is, and here's kind of what's next. But most of you know we have a newsletter, so I try to send that out monthly. And if you do not know, the link is here to subscribe. It does come from NC Public Schools. And so if you've moved from one district to another, it probably didn't follow your email account. So just make sure you sign up again with your new email account. As you have all because you're here at this webinar, but we have ongoing webinar series. If you go to this link, you can always get kind of the updates about what they are and sign up for them just using that same link every time. And everything on demand is on this YouTube playlist. So wanted to mention that. If you want to know about all the things that DL and SC does, our team does, you can follow us on Eventbrite and get all of the notifications there. There's an AI series. You missed Meredith yesterday, which was wonderful. It was about what is school for. I could sing Billie Eilish, but I don't think you really want me to. But that's what I kept thinking about with that question. What is school for? And we also have some coaching ones. So just know that, I appreciate those of you that come to these library webinars, but there's good things to learn from other folks across the team as well. I always reach out. We have an amazing communications person on our team, Jennifer Causey, and she keeps all the socials going. So if it's easier for you to follow things on social media and get reminded of things rather than getting another email, I would recommend you follow on your favorite platform because you get all the good stuff there. And then another thing I wanted to mention as we're kind of closing out is if you don't know, on the hub, so on our team's website, there is an SLMC link. It hadn't been updated in a hot minute, not gonna lie. So that was been my mission is as we've been kind of waiting on impact and trying to get it sent out there and official, I've been working on some of these other behind the scene things. And so good updates are coming to this. This has been kind of over a year on my to-do list, and now it's finally happening. So what you'll see on here, okay, so you see there's the standards and guidelines and this document, and it's helpful. It's just been there for a while, and so it needs to be refreshed. So instead of just kind of updating these few links, I really thought about what questions do I get, what things have I curated, and I put together what I'm calling a proposed one-stop document. So I'm showing it to you, but I'm going to tell you where, if you are curious, you have the link now. It's not official and it's not linked anywhere else yet. But what I could use from all of you that either are here live or watch later, if you are interested, if you're like, man, this is great, but it could be better, or it's missing XYZ, I would really love to know about it. So that is the one-stop resources. It's a lot more comprehensive than what's currently up there. I also have some frequently asked questions, only 2, but I can't tell you, I get at least a weekly email about licensure. And I am not a licensure specialist. So I have information about where to go learn about licensure. And Battle of the Books, that's the other one. Battle of the Books is an NC Slamma program. So if you have other questions that you might want to see on there you think would be great, let me know. And And how you can let me know is, again, shoot me an email if that's the easiest thing that you want to do. But I also created this survey that will go out through the newsletter as well. So you guys are the first to know about it. But this is a pulse check. Everything's optional, and it's completely anonymous. Okay. So if there's anything that you would like me to know, or our team to know about what could we do better about communication, if anything, or are there any kind of specific professional learning that you're looking for this year? I would love to hear a little bit more about that. That's going to be in this survey. Both the resource, this one-stop shop, if you want to give feedback on, is it too overwhelming or this is ready, I'm excited about it, you can let me know that. We also had what was called the new librarian toolkit, and I've refreshed that. It's, again, not published, not posted anywhere but here. But this is where you could go and get more information. Okay. So this is kind of the bridge, I would say, from this is like your day-to-day guide, right? The guidelines, impact guidelines, are very big picture, program, professional, aspirational, right? This is going to serve as that day-to-day, like, just how do I do this one thing kind of, or what are the standards that I teach, right? So this would serve as that. The one-stop shop document is literally just a whole lot of links, but as a one-stop place to go get them. So if you want to share any of your thoughts and feelings about that, I also put 2 other kind of sections, but they're short. There's like 2 or 3 questions per section. So if that interests you and you want to give some feedback on us and loop us in on what's good, what could be better, I'm very eager to know. And then the last thing I have for you while we sign off here, I've been wanting to read this book for a while. I'm gonna tell you it is selfishly motivated, but the Colorado Library Program, so the State Library of Colorado, did a whole state read along with this book. I thought it would be a really great time to do it, to think a little bit about our impact and some of the good things that we do as school librarians in terms of building school culture. So this is an interest form. I have an idea of when this might look like and when it might happen. Probably not till October, the very earliest. But if it's of interest, and yay, I know, Lila, I'm definitely going to reach out to you because I know that Buncombe did a study on this. But if it's something that you'd be interested in, I have a link here, and I would just be kind of curious to know who else would want to join in on that as well. So a whole lot of information I threw at you, and if you stuck with this whole time, I'm very impressed. But just remember, the top of this document is the too long didn't read, if you want the short version. But I tried to bring kind of everything together for you in one place as a place to kind of reference back as you need it. So thank you for coming and starting the year off, hearing a little bit about where we're at with different things and giving kind of the big overview, but I'm excited to get started this year and dig into things starting with impact in the next couple weeks. So I'm going to stick around. If you have questions or things you want to talk about, we will stop recording. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming, and again, dealing with the